What if I told you that one of the world's most terrifying historical figures, a man whose legacy literally screams horror, might have actually been one of history's most brilliant military strategists? It's a wild thought, I know, but history has a way of forcing us to look at the unimaginable through a very different lens.
It seems completely counterintuitive, right? Like, how could a literal monster be a master tactician? Well, to really unpack this, we need to set a pretty grim scene. We have to travel all the way back to the 15th century and look at a ruler whose very name made people across continents tremble. We're talking about a man who commanded such overwhelming terror that it's kind of hard to believe he actually existed outside of folklore.
His realm was, quite literally, a kingdom filled with death. It was a place so completely soaked in brutality that people reportedly traveled from far and wide just to witness it. Just think about that for a second. They weren't coming for trade, and they definitely weren't coming for diplomacy. They literally traveled across medieval Europe simply to witness the sheer, unbelievable cruelty that one single human being could inflict. It was this twisted, macabre spectacle of the medieval world.
Okay, let's dive into this. The man responsible for this absolute nightmare was Vlad Tepes, much better known to history as Vlad the Impaler. He was the 15th century ruler of a territory called Wallachia. Now, you probably already know that his incredibly dark history and his reign of terror became the absolute foundation for the Dracula legend we all know today. But as you'll see, the actual history is far more chilling and way more complex than any vampire story you've ever watched on screen.
To really understand why Vlad ruled the way he did, we have to look at his environment. Section 1. Trapped between two empires. The 15th century geopolitical trap.
So Vlad ruled Wallachia, which is a small principality located in modern-day Romania. In his geographical situation, it was incredibly precarious. To the south, you had the Ottoman Empire, this massive, aggressive, rapidly expanding global power looking to conquer basically everything in its path. Then to the north, you had Hungary, another highly influential military force. So Vlad's tiny kingdom is dangerously squeezed right in the middle. He's caught in a vice grip. One wrong move, just one sign of weakness, and his entire territory would be completely swallowed up by either side. He was a very small fish swimming in a sea of absolute giants.
Which brings us to Section 2. A system built on fear, the architecture of terror. Because he was caught in this impossible geopolitical trap, Vlad knew standard diplomacy just wasn't going to cut it. Actually, scratch that. His rule wasn't about politics or treaties at all. It was a desperate system built entirely on generating paralyzing fear. And the mechanics of this fear were horrifically simple. Step 1. You cross the ruler. It doesn't matter if you're an invading enemy soldier, a petty thief, or even one of his own local nobles. Step 2. You get impaled on a long wooden stake. And Step 3. You are left to suffer for hours, sometimes days, before finally dying. This wasn't just an execution method, you guys. It was a highly visible public spectacle, deliberately designed to broadcast a chilling message. Let me give you a famous, really chilling historical example of just how strictly he enforced this reputation. The narrative tension really spikes when the Ottoman ambassadors arrive. The mighty Sultan sends his direct representatives straight to Vlad's court. These are high-status men, representing the greatest superpower of the region, arriving in Wallachia, presumably to demand submission and extract tribute. They fully expect the usual deference given to the world's most powerful empire. But when they enter his presence, Vlad demands they remove their headwear. The ambassadors refuse, citing their strict religious customs. Now, in almost any other royal court in Europe, this would just be a tense diplomatic standoff, right? A clash of cultures you negotiate.
But for Vlad, no way. This was a direct challenge to his absolute authority. He demanded complete subservience, and any refusal was a crack in his armor of terror. Enraged, Vlad responds in a way that perfectly encapsulates his brutal mindset. He supposedly ordered their turbans to be nailed directly to their skulls. Yeah, he told them that if they were so deeply attached to their customs, he would personally ensure that those turbans would never ever be removed. It's a horrific, visceral punchline to the story, but it proved to the whole world that absolutely nobody, not even the protected emissaries of a massive empire, was safe from his wrath.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 3, the Forest of the Impaled, the ultimate deterrent.
Eventually, the Ottoman Sultan has had enough. A massive Ottoman army marches directly into Wallachia to crush Vlad once and for all. But what they found waiting for them? It stopped them completely dead in their tracks. Thousands. They didn't just find a burned village or a couple of warning signs. The advancing troops discovered what notoriously became known as the Forest of the Impaled. We're talking thousands of captured enemy soldiers' bodies mounted on tall stakes. A literal forest of corpses stretching for miles across the landscape. The psychological weight of seeing thousands of your own comrades displayed like this, it is almost impossible to comprehend.
And here is the absolute drop-the-mic fact that brilliantly illustrates the dark success of his twisted strategy. The sight was so overwhelmingly horrifying that the Ottoman Sultan himself, a man who was entirely accustomed to the bloody realities and massive casualties of 15th century warfare, literally turned his massive army around. He ordered a full retreat. He decided he'd rather turn back than continue forward into a land ruled by a man capable of engineering such a staggering atrocity. So, through sheer, unadulterated terror, Vlad had successfully defended his borders against a vastly superior military force.
So, the crucial point is, how do we make sense of all this? Section 4, Madman or Master Strategist, the final verdict.
Even today, historians remain deeply divided on this. One camp views him strictly as a ruthless tyrant, a bloodthirsty monster acting out of pure pathological cruelty who just relished the suffering of others. But there's a really strong counterargument. The other camp argues he was a desperate ruler who completely understood the impossible geopolitical odds he faced. In this view, he intentionally manufactured this overwhelming psychological terror as his greatest and maybe his only weapon. It was a calculated deterrent strategy to protect his tiny kingdom from being entirely swallowed up by two surrounding superpowers. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and leaves us with this fascinating, haunting dilemma. Was the terror he inflicted merely the manifestation of unchecked cruelty? Or was it the ultimate, most brutally effective weapon of survival available to him at the time? What do you think?